Hello, wild people. Welcome to my Pacific Crest Trail gear postmortem. Today, I'm going to talk about what gear thrived, survived, and died on the Pacific Crest Trail. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this episode of AK Wild One. When we look at gear in the store or at pictures online, we really don't have a strong sense of how our gear will perform once we reach the trail on a long-distance backpacking trip. Today I want to give you my candid evaluation of how my gear choices measured up at the end of our PCT backpacking trip. I'm not sponsored by any of the companies that produce the gear mentioned. That way I can avoid any conflict of interest and give you my candid opinion about the gear. You can find links to the gear I talked about today in the gear description. So here goes. Okay, let's talk about the big four. My pack was a Ula Circuit. This 68-liter pack weighs just over 2 pounds, and I love the comfort and the durability of this pack. About 200 miles into my hike, the internal suspension hoop sleeve on the inside of the pack ripped apart, and I sent an email to the company. Within an hour of them receiving that email, they asked me to send a picture, which I did, and then within 3 days they sent me a new pack that arrived on the trail. ULA's customer support was exceptional. My new pack survived the remaining 2,300 or so miles without a hitch, and I still think it looks relatively brand new. There's just a few scrapes and tears, most of them operator error, but in my opinion this pack is solid, strong, and comfortable. It is one of the most popular packs on the PCT. Okay, for our tent we use the Z-Packs Triplex. I don't have it with me because I sent it to Z-Packs for some minor repairs at the end of the hike. Flash and I slept in this tent for about 180 nights or so, and it held up very well. The Triplex is made out of Dyneema fabric. The top of our tent developed some tiny holes that we did our best to patch up. And we did have to replace the zipper pulls twice, which is to be expected. Our journey on the PCT was mild by comparison to other hikers. During our 2 seasons on the trail, we encountered one serious rainstorm and one snowstorm, and the tent performed well on both occasions. By the end of the summer, just as I was finishing up Northern California, the zippers failed, and I had to use binder clips to close the mosquito netting. Luckily, that didn't happen in Oregon. Overall, I think our Z-Packs tent performed as well as could be expected. The guidelines stayed strong, and we used a sheet of Type R as a ground sheet to protect the bottom of the tent. I would recommend the Z-Packs Triplex as a good solid tent for 2 hikers. We used MSR groundhog tent stakes and managed to bust just one of them during our trip. For a sleeping bag, I chose the REI Magma 15-degree bag. This bag has 850 fill power goose down. It did keep me warm when the temperatures ran into the high 20s near Big Bear. However, Flash's bag ripped on a seam, and my men's size bag felt more like a straitjacket, and the zipper pull failed way too quickly. I'll be looking for a new sleep system on my next thru hike. Based on my subjective experience, I'd probably not recommend this bag for taller, full-figure backpackers. For a sleeping pad, I used a Thermarest Neo Air X-Therma. This piece of gear was amazing, tough, and reliable. I blew it up with my mouth, which is a no-no in purist backpacking circles, and it was only in the last 3 weeks of my hike this summer that it developed a small hole that I was able to patch quite easily. This pad was a warhorse, and I would highly recommend it. Part of what probably helped ensure its longevity is I carried a foam foldable sleeping pad for a little extra R value and protection from cactus needles and spruce and pine needles. And it was a comfortable place to sit during rest breaks. So what's a sleep system without a little bit of extra creature comforts? So for a pillow, I use a Trekology ultralight inflatable pillow. And this pillow survived. You can see how dirty it is, and yet it survived and it never even got a hole in it. Another perhaps luxury item I carried was a Brownit silk mummy sheet for my sleeping pad. So it served kind of as a sheet, and it prevented me from sticking to my Thermarest when I went to bed hot and sticky after those long hikes. Okay, for cooking gear, I started out using my Jetboil Stash burner, but by Kennedy Meadows South, the inside coupling fell out, so my fuel bottle wouldn't fit. Luckily, I was able to purchase an MSR Pocket Rocket 2 stove, and it lasted my whole trip about 1,900 miles. I would highly recommend the MSR Pocket Rocket 2 stove. It's very simple and it's very compact. I also carried a Vargo 900 milliliter titanium pot, which was just right for boiling water for 2 people. In addition, I carried a Sea to Summit collapsible camping cup because, well, I love my morning coffee, so maybe this might be considered a luxury item. And of course, since I don't like to eat with my fingers, I purchased a Tokes titanium long-handled spoon with some fluorescent string on the end just to make sure I wouldn't lose it. And for the entire trip, I carried the BearVault 500. It weighs about 2 pounds and 9 ounces, so it is quite heavy, but it's a decision I made grudgingly. I didn't want to have any encounters with bears or varmints or rodents, and so it was a personal decision that I made. I carried my food, stove, titanium spoon, and collapsible cup inside my bear canister. And I also stored my toothpaste and lotions in the BearVault at night. My water purification system was pretty standard. I carried the Sawyer Squeeze, and Sawyer Squeeze, the company says, is good for about 100,000 gallons. But we do have to be meticulous on the back flushing. I had to replace my Sawyer Squeeze once, but again, that was due to operator error because, well, I had to filter some frog water basically in Oregon during one hot stretch. For a bladder bag, I used the Ceenoc 2-liter bags. We went through about 2 of these as we got too many pinholes and pricks and tears to fix. Overall, the Ceenoc bladders performed well, about as well as could be expected. So I do recommend the Sawyer Squeeze and the Ceenoc bladder bags. Okay, let's talk about clothing. Clothing is that one area that I tweaked and refined my choices as I progressed on the trail. I started out with these Rail Riders LOA hiking shorts that I picked up in Kennedy Meadows, and they worked well. I then shifted to these Patagonia Trail Fair hiking shorts, and I wore these in 2023 when I completed the Oregon and Northern California sections. They were lighter than the other pair of shorts, and they seemed to perform really well, and they were reasonably durable. One of my nice creature comforts was my Buck Naked underwear, and this underwear is available through Duluth Trading Company. And I didn't experience any chafing while I was wearing these bad boys. Okay, I used, I don't know if these are still available, but they're the REI Relaxed Hiking Pants. They're nice and light, and they also dried very quickly. I went through 2 Mountain Hardwear Crater Lake hiking hoodies. This one was from last year, and I think Flash may have thrown away my hiking hoodie from this year. It practically disintegrated. This one had, about 700 miles on it. My other one had about 1,800 or so miles on it, my blue one. And it really basically fell apart from rips and disintegration, but I just love these hoodies. Okay, I think I ripped through about 6 pairs of darn tough socks on the PCT. Overall, I feel these socks perform better than could be expected. The PCT trail is pretty tough on socks, and so to only go through 6 pairs seemed reasonable to me. I also carried sealskin socks, and these were very helpful when you encountered wet conditions like in the Sierra, where maybe you're getting your feet wet quite a bit, and they kept your feet pretty warm, kept my feet pretty warm. Then for those cold nights, I brought along some Patagonia Capeline midweight base layer top and bottom. This year, when it was really hot in Oregon and Northern California, I actually sent these home. I went through 7 pairs of Hoka Speed Goats. I bought a new pair about every 400 miles. And on the inside, I used Curex Run Pro insoles. For rain gear, I use the Outdoor Research Helium rain jacket and rain pants. And our rain gear was never really put to the test. This rain gear performed really well in the wind, which I liked. And when I returned home to Alaska, I went on a 4-day backpacking trip where it rained all the time, and I was pretty impressed with how well this performed. It didn't wet out on me. So I have a little more confidence in this system now that I might not have had before. Once we reached Washington last year, I decided to switch out my rain gear and try some Frog Togs. And this was good rain gear, although I really don't feel like it was put to the test. At the end of the day, I really enjoyed slipping into my Zero sandals, but they didn't really last the whole trip. The Velcro wore out after about half the trip, and I'll do my best to try to restore the Velcro on the back using a toothbrush. But just to see if I can gain some extended life. These were very comfortable and enjoyable to put on, like I said, in the evening. Okay, I also carried a Patagonia Micro Fleece half-zip jacket on my trip. As far as a hiking hoodie goes, I probably made a mistake there. I purchased an Eddie Bauer puffy jacket, but the zipper went south way too quick, and I wouldn't recommend this puffy jacket. So I'm in the market for a new puffy jacket. Okay, as far as winter equipment goes, I highly recommend the Kahtool MICROspikes. These came in very handy last year in the San Jacintos and during certain stretches of the Sierra. And I didn't need them this year in Oregon. Last year I also carried the Corsa Camp Ice Axe, and I carried it basically for no reason last year because I didn't need it. Okay, let's talk about a few miscellaneous pieces of gear. I used the Nitecore NU 25 360 lumens rechargeable headlamp, and this headlamp was a trooper, and I highly recommend it. I also carried Nun water tablets and liquid IV for hydration, and I recommend these products too. I carried the indispensable Tent Lab R Deuce R ultralight backpacking potty trowel. Also carried this microfiber camping towel. For trekking poles, I started out with the Black Diamond Trail Cork trekking poles. They're very durable, and they should have busted on me on several occasions. I finally did break one pole in Oregon after about 2,200 miles on the trail, and that was due to operator error. I went into Bend, REI, and so I decided to shift to a lighter trekking pole, the Black Diamond Trailback trekking poles, and they're very light, but for some reason one of the poles crimped, and I'm not really sure when this happened. I carried a Granite Gear zip sack and stuff sack for my Ditty bag. I also carried a variety of Sea to Summit stuff sacks on the trip, one for some extra clothing and one for my sleep system. And I used a 13-liter bag for my sleep system, and I used an 8-liter bag for my extra clothing. I carried a Garmin InReach Mini, and this device proved to be effective and dependable. Okay, I carried a Victorinox Class SD 7-function pocket knife. It was all I needed, and I'm glad I didn't carry a bigger knife on the trail. I also carried a Cotopaxi hip pack to keep most of my camera gear in, and I'll go over my camera gear in a future episode. And finally, I liked my chum's lightweight surfer's wallet that I kept my essential cards and cash in during the trip. Woo, that's a lot of gear. Well, wild people, I hope this gear postmortem helps you plan for your long-distance hike. Please feel free to comment on my choices. Gear choices can be very subjective, and you have to realize that my recommendations might not work for you. The important thing is to find as dependable gear as possible, get a little dirty, and find your wild adventure. And so, until we meet again, live wildly, my friends.